I was sitting in a small glass-walled office at the back of a bank branch, trying not to cry in front of a stranger, when the manager did something I will never forget. She listened to my whole story, the deployment, the empty accounts, the husband who'd told me there was nothing left, and then she went quiet for a moment, glanced once at her computer screen, and slid a second folder across the desk toward me. She didn't say anything at first. She just tapped it, twice, with one finger, and looked at me in a way that told me my life was about to change. "Mrs. Carter," she said quietly, "I don't think your husband told you everything." I didn't touch the folder right away. I remember my hands were in my lap and I couldn't make them move, because some part of me already understood that whatever was inside it was going to be either the worst thing I'd ever learned or the thing that saved me, and I wasn't sure my heart could take finding out which. But let me back up. Because the story of how a 36-year-old Army sergeant ended up in a bank manager's office with no money and nowhere to go doesn't start with that folder. It starts 8 months earlier, on the day I deployed, when I kissed my husband goodbye and trusted him with everything I owned, and he was already, that very morning, planning to take it all. My name is Renee Carter. I'm 36 years old, and I'm a sergeant first class in the United States Army, a communications specialist. My job is signal, making sure that when everything else fails, the message still gets through. Radios, networks, encrypted links, the invisible threads that keep people connected when the world is falling apart around them. I've spent 15 years learning that communication is everything, that the truth has to be able to travel even when someone is trying to jam it. There's an irony in that I've thought about a lot since, because for the better part of a year, the one person I trusted most managed to jam my signal completely. He controlled what I knew, and he counted on the distance to keep me in the dark. I met Dylan 9 years ago, back home in Georgia, between my second and third deployments. He was easy to be around, funny, warm, the kind of man who made friends everywhere, and remembered the bartender's name. He worked in commercial real estate, did well when the market was good, less well when it wasn't. When we married, I told myself I'd finally found the thing the Army makes so hard to hold on to, a steady home to come back to. We didn't have children, the timing never worked with my deployments, but we had a house outside Savannah, and 2 dogs, and what I believed was a real partnership. The cracks were there before I deployed. I can see them clearly now, the way you always can in the rearview mirror. Dylan had gotten cooler over the previous year, more secretive with his phone, quicker to snap at me over small things. His real estate work had slowed and money was tighter than it had been, and he'd started handling all of our finances himself. "You've got enough on your plate with the unit," he said. "Let me take this off you." I let him. It felt like love at the time. He moved everything to paperless statements. He set up the online logins under his own email. Slowly, without my ever quite noticing, I stopped being able to see our own money. His mother didn't help. Sharon had never liked that Dylan married a soldier. "A wife who's never home," she'd say, with that particular smile. "It's no wonder he has to manage everything himself." I learned to let it roll off. I told myself she was just old-fashioned. Then my unit got the orders, and I deployed for 8 months, and I kissed Dylan goodbye in the pre-dawn dark outside our house, and I told him I loved him, and I meant it. He told me he'd take care of everything while I was gone. He meant that too, I suppose. Just not the way I understood it. The deployment itself was hard in the ordinary ways. Long hours, bad sleep, the particular loneliness of being 10 time zones from everyone you love. But Dylan and I talked when we could. Video calls, messages, and for the first few months everything seemed fine. He told me the bills were paid, the house was good, the dogs missed me. I sent my pay home the way I always did. As a deployed soldier, I was earning more than usual, with hazard pay and the tax advantages, and I remember feeling good that we were building something, that I'd come home to a cushion we could use to finally get ahead. Around month 5, Dylan got harder to reach. The calls got shorter. He seemed distracted, then annoyed that I was asking. When I brought up money once, just to check in, to plan, he got sharp with me in a way that stung across all that distance. I've got it handled, Renee. Do you think I'm an idiot? Focus on your job. I let it go. What else could I do from where I was? I told myself the stress of running the household alone was wearing on him. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, because that's what you do for the person you love, and because the alternative was too frightening to consider from a bunk halfway around the world. By month 7, he'd stopped answering half my calls. I told myself it was the time difference. I told myself a lot of things. I came home in the spring. There was no banner, no crowd. Dylan said he had a work thing and couldn't make it to the welcome home formation, and I stood on that field watching other soldiers get swallowed up in their families' arms while I called a taxi. I told myself it was fine. I told myself we'd have our real reunion at home. The house was quiet when I got there. Too quiet. One of the dogs was gone. Dylan said he'd rehomed Bear because it was too much to handle 2 dogs alone, which was a lie, because Bear was the easy one, but I didn't understand that yet. Dylan hugged me, but it was the hug of a man going through emotion. And that night, when I tried to talk about the future, about the money we'd saved, about the plans we'd made, he got quiet in a way I'd never seen. "Renee," he said, "there's no money." I thought I'd misheard him. "What do you mean there's no money? I sent my whole deployment pay home." "We should have—" "It's gone," he said. "The market was bad. I had some deals fall through. There were expenses you don't know about. I've been trying to keep us afloat and it's gone, okay? The accounts are basically empty. I didn't want to worry you while you were over there." I sat down on the edge of our bed. 8 months of hazard pay. The savings we'd had before I left. All of it gone while I was deployed, and he hadn't said a word. How is that even possible? Where did it go? I told you. Bad deals. Expenses. Do you want to see me grovel about it? I feel terrible enough. And then he did the thing he always did when he was cornered. He turned it around on me. You know, it would have been nice to have a wife here helping, instead of leaving me to deal with everything alone. But that's the life you chose, isn't it? I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to a man I'd been married to for 7 years, and felt, for the first time, like I was lying next to a stranger. Because something didn't add up. And I am, at my core, a person who cannot let a thing that doesn't add up simply lie there. 15 years of signal work had trained me. When the message you're receiving doesn't match the source you know, you don't accept the message. You check the source. And the source, the Dylan I'd married, careful with money, proud, transparent, did not match the message that 8 months of my pay had simply evaporated into bad deals he couldn't quite explain. The next morning, after Dylan left for whatever he was actually doing during the days, I tried to log into our accounts. My logins didn't work. He'd changed them. The statements were paperless, tied to his email, which I couldn't access. Every window I had into our own money had been quietly closed while I was gone. For most people, that would have been a dead end. But here's the thing Dylan forgot. The same way these men always forget one thing. I wasn't most people, and more importantly, my name was still on those accounts. He could change the passwords. He couldn't change the fact that I was a legal account holder, and a legal account holder can walk into a bank branch, in person, with her military ID and her social security card, and ask to see her own records. So that's what I did. I drove to the main branch of our bank the next morning, not the little ATM kiosk, the real branch, the one with actual people. I want to tell you I had a plan, but I didn't. I had a gut feeling and a folder of my own identification, and a marriage that had started to smell wrong. I told the young man at the front desk that I needed to review the accounts under my name, that I'd been deployed and my access had lapsed, and that I needed to speak with someone who could help me. He took one look at my military ID, and something in his face softened, and he said, "Let me get the branch manager for you, ma'am." The branch manager's name was Gloria Ruiz. She was maybe 50, warm-eyed, with the kind of steady competence you can feel the moment someone walks into a room. She took me back to her glass-walled office, closed the door, and asked how she could help. And I told her. I hadn't meant to tell her everything. I'd meant to just ask for statements, but there was something about the quiet of that office and the kindness in her face, and it all came out. The deployment, the pay I'd sent home, coming back to a husband who said the accounts were empty and couldn't explain where the money went. The changed passwords, the locked-out logins. Gloria listened to all of it without interrupting once. She had a legal pad in front of her, but she didn't write anything down. She just listened, watching my face. And when I finished, she turned to her computer and typed for a while, her expression giving nothing away. The silence stretched long enough that I started to feel foolish, started to think maybe Dylan was right. Maybe I was just a paranoid wife who'd misunderstood. Maybe I was about to be told that yes, the accounts were empty, and I should go home and apologize to my husband. Then Gloria stopped typing. She looked at her screen for a moment, and then she reached into a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the desk to me. "Mrs. Carter," she said quietly, "the joint checking and savings accounts you're asking about, the ones you're a holder on, yes, those have very low balances. Almost nothing. That part is true." She paused. "But I want to make sure you understand something. Those aren't the only accounts your name is attached to." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She tapped the folder. "There's a second account. A money market account, opened about 14 months ago, and your name is on it as a joint holder. I'd guess your husband added you to it and never mentioned it. Probably back when things were good. Probably so it wouldn't look suspicious later. But legally, it's half yours. And it is not empty, Mrs. Carter." She looked at me steadily. "There's a substantial amount of money in it, and based on the transfer records I'm looking at, a great deal of it moved into that account from your joint savings, the same savings your husband just told you were gone, over the past 8 months, while you were deployed." The room went very quiet. I could hear the hum of the branch outside the glass, the ordinary sounds of an ordinary Tuesday, and I sat there and understood that I had not misread my husband at all. He hadn't lost our money. He'd hidden it. He'd moved my deployment pay, dollar by dollar, into an account he thought I didn't know about, and he'd forgotten, or never realized, that in setting it up during the good times, he'd put my name on it too. I did not open the folder to celebrate. I opened it because I needed to see it with my own eyes, and when I did, the numbers confirmed everything Gloria had said. I photographed every page with my phone right there in that office. Gloria didn't stop me. In fact, she helped. She printed me an official copy of the account records I was legally entitled to as a joint holder, put them in an envelope, and slid that across the desk too. "You're entitled to these," she said. "Whatever you do next, you do it with the facts in your hand." I asked her, before I left, why she'd helped me the way she had. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My sister went through something like this. She didn't find out until it was too late, and she lost years of her life to it. When you walked in here in that uniform, having served your country, and told me your husband said the money was just gone." She shook her head. "I've been doing this for a long time, Mrs. Carter. I know what gone usually means. It usually means somebody moved it. I just had to check." Before I left her office, Gloria did one more thing that I've never forgotten. She stood up, came around the desk, and put her hand on my shoulder. "I'm going to tell you something as a person, not as a bank manager," she said. "The next few weeks are going to be some of the hardest of your life, because you're going to have to look at a man you loved and understand that he planned this. That's a specific kind of pain, and there's no shortcut through it. but you are going to be okay. I can tell. Women who walk in here and check the second account instead of believing the lie, they're the ones who come out the other side." She squeezed once and let go. "Now go home, and don't let him see a thing on your face until you're ready. You've got the hard part in that envelope. The rest is just patience." I sat in my car in that bank parking lot for a long time before I could drive. I looked at the envelope on the passenger seat, and I thought about the woman who'd walked in an hour earlier. Small, uncertain, half convinced she was paranoid, half convinced she deserved whatever had happened to her. And I thought about the woman driving home now, who knew exactly what her husband had done and exactly what she was going to do about it. The uniform in my closet suddenly meant something it hadn't that morning. I'd spent 15 years believing the truth had to be able to get through no matter what. I'd just proven it to myself, about my own life. I drove home from that bank a completely different person than the one who'd walked in. Not richer. I hadn't touched a dollar, but armed. For 8 months I'd been receiving a jammed signal, a false message from a source I'd trusted. And Gloria Ruiz had just handed me the real transmission. I did not go home and confront Dylan. I want to be clear about that, because I think the instinct is always to march in and throw the truth in their face. But 15 years in the army taught me that when you intercept the enemy's real plan, you do not immediately let them know you've intercepted it. You use the advantage. You prepare. You move when you're ready, not when your anger tells you to. So I went home, and I made dinner, and when Dylan came in, I asked him about his day, and I let him believe I was still the defeated, confused wife who'd accepted that our money had vanished into bad luck. It was the hardest acting I've ever done. I sat across from a man who had spent 8 months stealing from me while I served overseas, and I passed him the salt and asked if he wanted seconds. And the whole time my mind was moving very fast. The next morning I made 2 calls. The first was to my older sister, Tanya, who lived in Atlanta and had spent our whole childhood being the person I could tell the truth to. I told her everything, the empty accounts, the second folder, the hidden money market account with my name on it. There was a long silence, and then Tanya said in a voice gone low and furious, "He did this while you were deployed? While you were serving? Renee, I swear." She stopped herself. "Okay, what do you need? Money? A place to stay? A lawyer? You tell me and it's done. You are not handling this alone." "I need somewhere to think," I said, "and I need you to not call him and scream, even though I know you want to. If he finds out I know, he'll move the money before I can do anything about it." "My lips are sealed," she said, "but you're coming to stay with me the second you're ready. I mean it." The second call was to a lawyer, a family law attorney named Francis Adeyemi, whom I found through the legal assistance office on post, a resource I'd earned in 15 years of service and never once used. Her office was small and cluttered, files stacked on every surface, a coffee maker that had clearly survived a decade of hard mornings. She was maybe 60, silver-haired and unhurried in a way that made the ground feel solid for the first time in days. She listened to my whole story, and then she looked at the bank records Gloria had given me, going through them slowly, page by page. When she finished, she took off her reading glasses and set them down. "Sergeant Carter, I've done family law for 31 years, and I'm going to tell you 2 things. The first is that what your husband did, moving marital assets into a hidden account while you were deployed, and then lying to your face about it, is not just a betrayal. It's the kind of thing courts take very seriously, especially when it's done to a service member during a deployment. There are protections for people in your situation, and there are consequences for people who exploit them. And the second thing?" She tapped the folder. "The second thing is that you have already done the single hardest part, and you did it before you ever walked into my office. Most people in your position never find the money. They believe the lie. They sign the divorce papers thinking there's nothing to fight over, and they walk away from what's theirs. You found it. You've got the records in your hand. She almost smiled. Your husband made one mistake, Sergeant. He forgot your name was on that account. And that one mistake is going to cost him everything he tried to hide. Over the next several weeks, I did what I'd trained my whole career to do. I gathered intelligence, and I did it quietly, and I did it clean. Francis was firm about the rules. I was not to touch the money in the money market account yet, not to move it, not to drain it, because doing so could complicate things and hand Dylan a grievance of his own. I was not to access his email or anything that wasn't legally mine. We win this clean, Francis said, or we hand him the one weapon he doesn't currently have, the ability to say you behaved badly too. So I worked only with what was legitimately mine, and it turned out that was a great deal. As a joint holder on that money market account, I was entitled to its full history, and Gloria, who had, I think, decided she was on my side, made sure I got every page of it. The story those pages told was damning. Over the 8 months of my deployment, Dylan had transferred my pay and our savings into that account in dozens of increments, timed and sized to avoid attention. But he hadn't just hoarded it. Some of it had gone out again, and where it went told its own story. A lease on an apartment across town, furniture, restaurants, a jewelry store, a beach rental. My husband had been building a whole second life with the money I'd earned while I was sleeping in a bunk overseas. And then Francis, working through the records and the public filings, found the piece that turned my stomach. The apartment lease wasn't in Dylan's name alone. It was co-signed by a woman named Bianca Reyes, and when we looked further, Bianca Reyes turned out to be someone Dylan had known for over a year, since before I deployed. The cooling in our marriage, the secretiveness with his phone, the bad deals, it had never been about money at all. The money was just the fuel. He'd been planning to leave me, quietly, with my own deployment pay funding the exit, and he'd counted on the distance and the lie to keep me from ever knowing until it was too late. I sat in Frances's office when she laid it all out, and I did not feel rage, though I had earned every right to it. What I felt was the cold, clean clarity I feel when a chaotic signal finally resolves into a clear picture, because I understood the whole shape of it now, and I understood something else, something that was almost funny. He had no idea I knew any of it. As far as Dylan was concerned, I was still the wife who'd swallowed the story that our money was gone. He thought his signal was still jamming mine. He didn't know I'd already found the source. There was one more thing Francis found, and it was the detail that made everything airtight. In the account records was a transfer Dylan had made just 11 days before I came home. A large one, moving the bulk of the money market balance into yet another account, one that was his alone, clearly meant to finish walling it off from me before my return. But the transfer had been initiated from the joint money market account, which meant it was documented, dated, and traceable, with my name sitting right there on the originating account as a holder he'd never told. He'd tried to close the last door. He'd just done it in a room I could still see into. The weeks before I made my move were the strangest of my life. I lived in 2 worlds inside one house. In one, I was Renee the defeated wife, quiet, sad, going through the motions of a marriage I'd been told was broke and broken. In the other, I was a sergeant running an operation, coordinating with Francis, organizing the records, planning each step. There were nights the loneliness of it nearly broke me, lying next to a man I now knew had betrayed me in the most calculated way possible, and smiling at him in the morning. There were nights I grieved, not for Dylan, but for the 7 years, for the version of my life I'd believed in, for the woman who'd kissed him goodbye in the dark and trusted him with everything. But something came back to life in me during those weeks too. With every page I organized, every piece Francis fit into place, I felt myself return. Not the wife Dylan had lied to and diminished from 10,000 miles away. The sergeant, the one who makes sure the truth gets through no matter who's trying to jam it. I'd wake before dawn out of old habit, make coffee in the dark, and work through the records, and for the first time since I'd come home, I felt like myself. My sister Tanya drove down from Atlanta twice during those weeks, under the cover of helping me settle back in. We'd sit at the kitchen table and she'd help me organize the paperwork, and once, when Dylan came home early, she smoothly slid everything under a stack of mail and started talking about a recipe. When he'd gone to change, she looked at me and mouthed, "You've got him." And I did. I just wasn't ready to spring it yet. One of those evenings, after Tanya had gone back to Atlanta and Dylan was out doing whatever he did in the evenings now, I sat alone at the kitchen table with all the records spread out in front of me, and I let myself really look at it, not as evidence, but as a story. 8 months of my life, laid out in transfer dates. Here was the week I'd spent on a miserable comms exercise in the heat, sleeping 4 hours a night. That same week, he'd moved $3,000 into the hidden account. Here was the night we'd had a good video call, one of the last good ones, where he'd told me he missed me and couldn't wait for me to come home. 2 days later, a transfer to the furniture store for the apartment he was building with someone else. I matched the dates of my deployment to the dates of his betrayal, and it was like reading 2 diaries side by side, mine full of longing for home, his full of quietly dismantling the home I was longing for. I didn't cry, exactly. I'd done most of my crying already. What I felt instead was a strange, steadying resolve. Every date on those pages was a small betrayal, and laid end to end they made an unbroken line, and that line pointed in exactly one direction. He had never intended for me to come home to a marriage at all. He'd intended for me to come home to nothing, to accept it and to disappear quietly so he could get on with the life my paycheck had funded. Understanding that completely, not suspecting it but knowing it, in dates and dollar amounts, was the thing that finally burned away the last of my guilt. There was nothing I could have done differently. There was nothing wrong with me. There was only a man who'd made a plan, and a wife who'd found it. Then 2 things happened close together. The first was that Francis filed the divorce petition, carefully timed, with the financial evidence already secured. Because I was the one who moved first, with the records in hand, Dylan never got the chance to control the narrative or spring his own version. He was served at the house. I watched his face when he opened it, watched the confusion turn to something else, as he realized this wasn't the quiet, amicable, nothing to divide split he'd engineered. He looked up at me, and for the first time in months, the easy confidence was gone. "Renee," he said, "what is this? We don't have anything to fight over. The accounts are empty. I told you." "I know what you told me," I said. My voice was as steady as it had been the day I walked into that bank. "I went to see Gloria. I watched the name land. I watched him try to figure out how much I knew, and fail, and I let him sit in it." The second thing happened at the mediation, 3 weeks later, in a conference room downtown. Dylan came in with a lawyer and with his whole story ready. The market was bad, the deals fell through, there was nothing left. This should be simple. His lawyer started walking through a proposed settlement built entirely on the premise that there were no significant assets to divide. Everyone splits their own nothing and walks away. Dylan looked almost relaxed. He still thought his signal was holding. And then Frances opened her folder, and she laid the pages on the table one at a time, the way you deal cards. The money market account. The dozens of transfers from our savings, dated across my deployment, the apartment lease co-signed with Bianca Reyes, the outflows, the furniture, the jewelry, the beach rental, and finally, the transfer made 11 days before my return, the one meant to close the last door, initiated from an account with my name still on it. Frances didn't raise her voice once. My client's husband represented to her, and has represented in this proceeding, that the marital accounts are empty, and there are no significant assets to divide, she said. The records tell a different story. Over the 8 months my client was deployed in service of this country, her husband moved her military pay and the couple's savings into a money market account, an account on which my client is, and has always been, a joint holder. That account is not empty, and these records show precisely where the money came from, where some of it went, and what it was for. The room had gone completely silent. Dylan's lawyer was reading the pages with an expression that was rapidly changing. Dylan himself had gone pale, and then a kind of gray, because there is no story you can tell over documented transfers with your own wife's name on the originating account. His lawyer asked for a recess. When they came back, everything had changed. There was no more talk of empty accounts and splitting nothing. Now it was Dylan's side scrambling to explain, to minimize, to find some version of events that the paper trail would support, and there wasn't one, because the paper trail was complete. I won't dramatize the rest, because the truth was more powerful than any drama. The matter took months to fully resolve. Real life isn't a movie, but the outcome was written the moment Francis laid down those pages. The court found that Dylan had concealed and misappropriated marital assets, and that he had done so while I was deployed, which the judge noted with particular disapproval. The money he'd hidden was restored to the marital estate and divided fairly, with my separate deployment contributions accounted for. Because he had concealed assets and misrepresented them in the proceeding, the settlement was weighted in my favor, and he was ordered to cover a significant share of my legal costs. The apartment, the second life, the exit he'd tried to fund with my service pay, all of it collapsed once the money he'd built it on was clawed back. It was never about taking everything from him. Frances made that clear early, and I came to agree with her. It was about not letting him take everything from me, including, very nearly, my belief that I could trust my own instincts. He'd almost convinced me the money was gone. He'd almost convinced me I was the paranoid one, and the only reason he didn't was a gut feeling, a military ID, and a bank manager who decided to check the second account. Bianca Reyes, I later heard, did not stay with Dylan once the money evaporated and the truth came out. I found I didn't care. She wasn't my battle. She never had been. Dylan's mother, Sharon, never apologized. I heard she told the family I'd ambushed her son, which I suppose in a sense I had, though I've never known a person more deserving of it. I found I didn't care about that either. I'd spent enough years absorbing Sharon's little cuts. I was done. Dylan called me once, months after everything was finalized. His voice was small, none of the old ease in it. "I don't know how you found it," he said. "I was so careful." "You forgot my name was on the account," I told him. "That's all. You spent 8 months planning how to disappear my money, and you forgot the one thing that mattered." I wasn't angry. My voice was as steady as it had been in Gloria's office. "You should have remembered who you married, Dylan. My whole job is making sure the truth gets through when someone's trying to block it. You just gave me the hardest signal I ever had to recover, and I recovered it." He didn't have an answer. There wasn't one. And I wished him well in the small, tired way you can mean it about someone who used to be your whole life, and I hung up, and I didn't carry him with me after that. Life didn't become perfect the moment the papers were signed. Real life never does. There were weeks the grief came back at odd hours, not for Dylan, but for the years, for the trust, for the woman who'd believed in a partnership that turned out to be a long con. But peace came, a little more each month, and I've learned peace is worth more than victory. I kept the house. I'd earned it. And my remaining dog, Scout, and eventually I even tracked down Bear, the dog Dylan had rehomed, and brought him back where he belonged. I stayed in the army, and my career kept moving. The same skills that had let me recover the truth about my own marriage turned out to be exactly the skills that got me promoted. Tanya and I are closer than we've ever been. And Gloria Ruiz, the bank manager who slid that second folder across the desk, I still send her a card every year. She probably doesn't know what she did for me, or maybe she does. She'd seen it before, with her sister. She just decided that this time, Someone was going to check the second account. People ask me sometimes how I found money my own husband swore didn't exist, and I tell them the truth. I didn't find it because I was clever. I found it because I refused to accept a message that didn't match the source, and because one kind stranger decided to look past the story she was told and check the facts. Everything after that was just recovery. So if there's one thing I'd want you to carry out of my story, it's this. When someone tells you there's nothing there, no money, no proof, nothing to fight over, and every instinct you have says the message doesn't match the person you know, do not accept the message. Check the source. Walk into the building. Ask to see your own records. Put your real name on the table and use it. Because the people who plan to take everything from you are counting on exactly one thing, that you'll believe them when they say it's already gone. And if you're ever sitting across a desk from a stranger who slides a second folder toward you, open it, even when your hands won't move. Even when you're afraid of what's inside. Because sometimes the truth someone worked very hard to hide from you is sitting in a folder you didn't know existed, waiting for you to be brave enough to look. I almost didn't walk into that bank. It was the best thing I ever did. Thank you for spending this time with me. If Renee's story reached something you've lived through, or someone you love who's being told there's nothing left to fight for, I'd be honored if you shared it. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever refused to believe a lie and turned out to be right? And if you'd like to hear more stories about quiet strength, hard-won truth, and the courage it takes to check the second account, I hope you'll subscribe and join me again. Take care of yourself, and take care of the people who've truly earned a place in your life.